Yes. The video processing thing is really slow today for some reason. I don't know what's going on. Anyways, I've got some video that's still uploading and it's taking a long time. Anyway, I wanted to talk about. So I watched this other movie last night. Also, it's called Strange Darling, and it was recommended by the same guy that recommended the Substance. And so I watched most of that movie last night. And this isn't going to be a movie review. And if you watch, you'll understand why I'm bringing this movie up. It's a good movie, whatever. But that's beside the point. So I want to talk about like this movie though. So I watched the movie, and the first scene of the movie, it starts off by saying part 3. Which was weird to me. It was like, part 3? For a second I thought, did I accidentally touch the phone screen and jump it up? And so I had to check, and I was like, no, it's at the beginning of the movie. So it starts off, the beginning of the movie starts off with part 3. And so I'm like, all right. And so I'm watching the movie, and it's about a serial killer. And apparently it's based on a true story, which I didn't really find out. I started realizing this more and more as I got in watching the movie. By like halfway through the movie, I realized this is based on a real serial killer. Okay. And so it starts off on part 3. And it starts off where this guy is trying to kill this fucking chick, and he's like fucking snorting coke, and he's chasing her in his nice like truck, and she's got this little red Pinto, and she's like all scared, and she's driving, and he's fucking following her and chasing her, and she's trying to get away from him. So you're assuming that it's the guy's the serial killer. That's part 3. Then it shifts from there after some scenes of this and that. And the guy's totally insane. Like, he's totally fucking insane, man. He's determined to kill this bitch. Like, he is like, it's crazy, right? So then, after it goes into that scene for a little while, then it shifts to part 1. Like, what the fuck? And so then when it shifts to part 1, it's him with this chick, and it doesn't even look like the same chick. Because the chick that he's chasing in part 3 has blonde hair, has really, really blonde hair. So then when it shifts to part 1, he's in his truck, the same truck, with this chick that doesn't look like, it looks like a different chick. So you're like, okay, this must be, some other chick that he fucking killed earlier, And so you're watching this, and then as the story develops and develops, then it jumps from part 1 to part 4. And then part 4, she's still trying to get away from this guy. And, so it's jumping around, right? And then it jumps from that to part 2. And then in part 2, that's when you realize that it's not what it appears. In part 2, it shows that this girl that he was hanging out with, she's the psychopath serial killer. And you're like, what the fuck, right? And then the scene, she takes the wig off, and then it's her with blonde hair, and it's the same chick. And so then you're starting to put all these pieces of this puzzle together, right? And you know, and like I remember thinking watching the movie, I'm like, dude, why are they always showing like it's always the guy that's the evil one, and women aren't psychopathic serial killers and shit. Because of what happened to me 2 years ago with my psycho ex, I get really annoyed by this constant, like it's always the man, never a psychopathic woman ever. And even when it is, it's kind of just like it's like a fluff piece. It's not really, she's not a very good antagonist. It's just kind of like, yeah, whatever. I mean, yeah. But because like what happened to me 2 years ago, man, this bitch is like I'm saying, if they did a movie about this, it would just so perfectly portray a woman as a real antagonist, not some kind of fluff piece antagonist. Because they're always trying to, this is what media does. They protect women, and they try to portray men always as the evil person. You see this all over in media, and they do it with other things other than women, but the women thing is just as bad. And so I'm like, oh, so it's this chick is a serial killer, and it's based on a true story. And the serial killings happened only like between 2017 and 2021 or something like that, right? So it's like, okay, now, even though I watched most of the movie, it was still kind of like, dude, I'm telling you, what happened to me, reflecting on what happened to me in comparison to this movie, just in the aspect of the woman being the antagonist, what happened to me way more portrays a fucking evil antagonist as a woman than this movie does. And this is a well done movie. And so first of all, what that confirms to me is I know that filmmakers have the ability to portray a female antagonist in the light of what I experienced 2 years ago. Like, totally. But no fucking movie producers are doing it at all. This is one reason why I want my story to get as somebody to do a film on my story. Because, dude, okay, now some other things. The interesting thing about how this film starts on part 3, well, that is exactly what I am doing with my story about my psycho demon possessed satanic witch cast Psycho X. I started at the event, so I'm starting on like part 2 or part 3. Then I'm going back to explain part 1, and I'm not doing it because for like film aesthetic or something, for the art of it. It's just because that's the best way to tell the story of my story, is to start with the fucking the big fucking proverbial bomb going off, and then go back and explain what happened up to that point, and then explain what the aftermath of the bomb. And so even though like what I'm doing, I'm starting at the event. And even though the event is like big, it's like boom, bam, like big explosion kind of, whatever. That's why I call it the event, because that's where everything, all this crazy shit happened at once out of nowhere. But the backstory is like just as important, if not more. Which is the same way that this film is presenting itself. Like it starts on part 3, and there's all this crazy shit going on, right? But then the backstory is like, okay, then it goes to part 1, and then it's just kind of like the story of some kind of romance where two people are getting ready to fuck and hook up, and they're drinking and warming each other up and talking to each other, and then it just kind of explains it, right? And then it jumps from part 1 to part 4, and so and it's based on a true story about a serial killer. Well, this is what's interesting to me, because my story is loosely based on serial killing. Like it involves the murder of Todd Minshall, and that's real, dude. Like that is not fake, right? Like this is not like me bullshitting you when I'm talking about the murder of Todd Minshall, the cover up of the murder, how it involved satanic people, self-proclaimed satanic witches, and that my ex was involved in, and that really, and even though I'm trying to refrain from opinion when I'm telling my story, that really there's a lot of evidence that she was one of the biggest players in this guy's murder. And like it's like crazy, dude. So to me, this is not coincidence that this movie is about a woman who's a serial killer, and it starts in the middle of the story, part 3, then it jumps back to part 1, then it jumps forward to part 4, and then back to part 2. Is because I believe it's the same reason that this is why I am telling this story the way I am. It's because this is the only way to tell the story. Like, this is what happened. And this is the only way, like, because if it weren't for the event that took place halfway through my story, well, then there wouldn't really be any reason to talk about everything that led up to the event. And if I start at the beginning and start talking about everything that led up to the event itself, it's not going to really hold people's attention. So I have to start at the event first to explain to people, this is why I'm telling this story. Then once people hear the event or part 2 or whatever, then I go back and tell part 1. Then it explains like, oh, and also in a way to where you as the viewer can make up your own mind rather than me, lecturing the viewer on how you should interpret this story. But it's just crazy. Like, this is why this movie was done this way. I know it's not coincidence. So they start at, this is the crazy shit that's going on, the crazy shit is going on is why they want to tell you this story. So they start with all the crazy shit, then they go back, and so then you can then you have a reason to follow part 1, because it's like, okay, part 1 has to do with all that insane shit that happened in part 3. So now I'll sit and watch part 1 to try to piece together this puzzle of what the story is. And it's based on a true story about a fucking female serial killer. And the other like really interesting thing is, dude, the antagonist, the female serial killer in this story, the antagonist has nothing on the antagonist in my story. Like my story, so, you know, like an antagonist, when you watch a movie, the antagonist, it's supposed to get you to be like where you want this person to go to jail, or you want this person to get fucked up because they fucking, what a piece of shit they are. They're the antagonist. And so the whole goal of the movie is to get the audience to feel a sense of vindictiveness towards the antagonist, and hope that the protagonist gets the antagonist, because the antagonist is really fucking, what a fucking piece of shit the antagonist is, right? And also, like, the more the antagonist is portrayed as like really like what a fucked up person, the more engaged the viewer gets. Okay, and what I'm saying is that the antagonist portrayed in my story, which is totally true, is way more like fucking this bitch is evil, way more so than the antagonist portrayed in this film that's about this woman who's a serial killer, and it's based on a true story about a woman who's fucking went on a serial killer rampage. Like, this bitch, this antagonist in this story has nothing, absolutely nothing on the antagonist in my story, which is why so the pre-event is important, because the post event is just kind of like there's all this fucked up shit, and this chick is like involved. It's pretty obvious she's involved. But when you see the pre-event, and then you see how like this person would have to be a total psychopath to just do what she did in the event. When you hear the pre-event, everything that led up to it is like, dude, what? And then the post-event, what the post-event does is it exposes even more. Like, that's when I find out how she's involved in Satanism and all this shit. Like, it all just starts coming out, where by the end, you're just looking at this like, dude, who in the fuck is this bitch? Like, she is a fucking total psycho, bro. So anyways, so I really, this is why I want to work on this some more, the event story, because it's really, it's an important story. And I mean, even just think of, okay, as in regards to the importance of the story, like I'm saying it's important. Okay, even if you just look at like, why does the media never do a really profound portrayal of a female antagonist? Whenever, like, you think of like Basic Instinct, okay, this woman, yeah, she was a bitch and stuff, but dude, I'm telling you, these antagonists, these female antagonists portrayed in these films are just like weak sauce compared to like what happened to me. And I know that what happened to me is real. Like, this happens to people in real life. Like, women are evil as they can be, so fucking evil, dude. But yet when they do antagonist portrayals of women in film, they're always use kid gloves, and they always, well, we don't want to be too hard on women because, you know, poor women, they're and so just in that aspect alone of the importance of my story, like, dude, women are just as evil as men. It's like unbelievable how much the media tries to cover this up, that women are as evil as men. And so this is one reason why this story is important, because we all know how well the media, you know, fools the masses and hypnotize the masses. And the more that can be penetrated, where it's like, let's just drop all of this fucking bullshit and get down to reality here. You know, it's not, okay, it's nice. Here's a movie about a female. It's based on a true story about a female and who's a serial killer. And, you know, wow, you know, that's cool. They're starting to push the envelope a little bit. But in reality, like, women are dude, they're easily as evil as men. But you never see that portrayed in movies. And there are movies where, dude, when they portray a man, oh, dude, they do an impeccable job at portraying the man as an antagonist, like an evil antagonist. But women, it's always just kind of, you know, milk toasty, kind of fluffy milk toasty, and, you know, whitewash and shit. And this needs to end. So that's just one reason why I feel my story is important. It is an important story, but many other reasons, like, because it really gets into Satanism and witchcraft and the seriousness of the shit. People act like Satanism, oh, it's nothing. Oh, those are just some Wiccans, you know, and stuff like, okay, you know, yeah. So it's a good thing there's people like Call for an Uprising that are doing videos trying to expose the evil that witches and shit like this. People are constantly trying to downplay this shit as though it's not that big of a, it's just some kids that are into DMT and hippie trippy stuff, and, you know, they like their Wiccan tree hugging thing. And that's you know, witches, switches, whatever. Who cares about witches? Like, no, you don't understand, motherfucker.